What is happening, everybody? Welcome back to the Sean Atwood channel. We are live with Crime Theory, myself, Ron Swanson, and John Wedger. How are you doing, John? I have to say, we didn't see each other last week due to the chaos of the realities of life sometimes for me. But how you been? What's been going on with you the last couple of weeks? Fill us in.
Yeah, it's been good. The weather's been nice. So lots of outdoors. My eyes healed up now, so that's good. Dog's behaving itself, so no more attacks from there. But I'm getting invited more and more onto people's podcast channels because, like I said before, things that we said have been almost predictive and they're occurring now. And it's quite strange because podcasting is sort of seen as a viable income now, and you're getting more and more people doing really these criminal based sort of podcasts where they're interviewing criminals. It sort of exhausts the pot, really. But what is really interesting is, although I'm very, very dead against anyone promoting criminality, I think it's just disgraceful. And you wouldn't bring out a newspaper that promoted crime, yet you can do it on podcasts. But that aside, when you get these criminals, ex-criminals, and they turn around and talk about their childhood, the unifying factor is most of them abused as children. And I listened to one today, a guy from a travelling background or something, when an armed robbery, attempted murder, all this blah blah rubbish. But he turned around and under therapy said, yes, because I was sexually abused. And he went on to become a therapist in prisons. And he said, whereas I say 80%, he said it's in the 90s that have been abused. So, things that we said, they're being validated, they're being corroborated. And it just seems, that we're on the right page with it all. We're saying the same thing.
That's 100%. I just want to say, Craig, listen, let's pray together. Okay, let's pray together and hope John can get to the end of a sentence this evening without my ADHD derailing the podcast several times. Listen, Craig, I'm rooting for you, brother. I'm rooting for you. So just before we get started, everybody, please make sure you like, subscribe, give us a little share, all that good stuff. Now, one of the things we want to do tonight is get a list of cases from you guys. Now, somebody was talking about Jay Slater before we started. I've got that noted down. So if you just put case in a big capital letters and then a space and then the name of the individual, I'll take a note of it and we'll jump into it. If you've got any questions tonight, it's a bit of a free ball show this evening. And, one of the things I was talking to John about before we started was Friday's show, talking about what we have to say is S-torsion, John, when it comes to the SEX torsion stuff. And we were talking about a case involving an 8-year-old girl. It was insane to think that an 8-year-old girl could be unoccupied long enough with a device for these sort of things to happen. When you were on the force, how prevalent was, blackmail of young individuals, vulnerable people, whether it was internet based or real life? And I mean, extortion is basically, it's horrible form of blackmail. But how prominent were things like that for you?
Well, pretty much unheard of. But when you got the child abuse inquiries, when you was on a dedicated child abuse team, you did get coercion with the child victims. You would get parents, maybe mum, threatening the child not to say anything against stepdads. You'll go to prison, no one will believe you. So you would get it from like perpetrators, and those protecting perpetrators would bully the victims. That was common, almost a given that would happen. So on that respect, massively. But if you was to take that element out of it, no, and kidnap in itself, and extortion in itself, and blackmail in itself were very, very rare.
Yeah. See, it was interesting because we were looking at a couple of cases that took place in Scotland where sadly the young men involved unalived themselves because of the embarrassment, not wanting to tell their parents. I think we're talking about a 14 and a 15-year-old. And the most recent case was about 8 weeks ago. And the case that we were looking at before that, I think it was 2011. And when you looked at the terminology between the two cases, John, you could see that in 2011, it was a new form of crime that there wasn't terminology for, and they hadn't quite gotten cottoned up to where these criminals are coming from. Whereas with the new case, it was. And seeing that evolution of a new crime, and we're starting to see that now with the UK government, actually, John, being the first country in the world trying to put legislation in for AI generated child abuse material, right? Because that seems to be the new epidemic, if you will, of
Well, there was always legislation of indecent images and pseudo images.
yeah,
So people can make one of the things prior really to the internet, or in its early days, but especially these phones and stuff like that.
yeah.
But when you was looking at the PDF files, would be things like the catalogs. So you've got like Freeman's catalogs, Grattan's
Of
catalogs,
course, yeah.
and what these weirdos would do would go to the children's section, and they would cut out because there would be children's underwear and stuff like
Yeah.
that, or they would cut out a kid's face and put it on an adult in underwear, and so they would make what's called a pseudo image,
Okay,
which
yeah.
was the same as a real life indecent image. So it's only a digital version of that, but the legislation has been there.
Here's the lucky thing, right? They're taking this AI thing so seriously, John. They went one step further. So now they're putting in mandatory sentences for anyone who's found to be programming an app that can produce these images. So brilliant, first of all. They're clamping down on that. And which is interesting for me, there's now, apparently there wasn't before, but a mandatory sentences for anyone who with a website that would distribute AI based stuff. I mean, I would imagine that would come under the same blanket as regular stuff. But they did make a big deal about how the UK is the first country to be trying to push this legislation through. It's never going to stop it all, but the deterrent must be there. I mean, there must have been a lot of these PDF files making this AI content, thinking, "Hey, well, no one's being harmed, right?" But it's not about that. It's about
It's all good, providing they don't see that this sort of online policing is a substitute for live, real, active human detectives. So, of course, now our roads are mainly governed by speed cameras.
Yeah.
Traffic cops that work motorways were one of the big sources of catching criminals, trafficking, children, drugs, and everything else.
Yeah.
Because they could sniff out, well, that van's got a dodgy backlight. Why is it going so fast? And catching heroin and things like that. So, these motorway cops were a good source of crime solving.
How long before there's, say, a break-in or there's a disturbance that isn't necessarily any violence being reported? How long before a police drone turns up to take my statement?
Well, it's going to happen, isn't it? I would have thought.
How long? Okay. So when's RoboCop happening? Do you think? Like when? Like legitimately? And I don't mean the drones or anything like that. But I mean, I think we're going to probably see the first generation before we cop it. Before we cop it, for sure. In some sense.
But it's no substitute. This is a problem because, especially when you've got like the child crime, what you do is that New Year's Day was always a very, very popular time for people to go and report, historic abuse cases because they wanted a new start, and they were going to a police station knowing that there would be a fully trained, uniformed officer there. But then this police stations went, the uniform presence went, it went to civilians, and now it's gone computerized. So crime reporting is absolutely plummeted. It's almost a thing of the past now.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would imagine it would be like the supermarkets, right, where they can machine as much of it as possible, but there's elements that need to remain with a human touch, if you will. And I just feel.
And if you're a serious and organised criminal, you're laughing. There's every chance you're not going to get caught. But the law only works for the decent people that abide by it. So, these tills that we have, and like Sainsbury's now have it, where you've got to present a barcoded receipt to get out and things like that. I mean, what right have they got to detain you? They have absolutely no right to detain you.
Yeah, I'm mortified. I'm mortified, Dan. We were in Sainsbury's one day, paid for everything, and exactly what John says. You come away from the till, you walk to go out, and there's a little barricade that asks you to scan your receipt. And John, she was mortified. I literally grabbed both of the barricades, pushed them straight open, and just walked straight through.
That's exactly what I did.
Sorry. I am not. This is not going to be a thing. I'm sorry. It's just not.
Yeah, well, I had the same, and the woman said, "You've got to use your receipt." I said, "Under what obligation am I to take a receipt? I don't want a receipt."
Yep.
And these barriers have to open under pressure because of fire regulations. So it's the same as the underground trains. They've got these barriers, but if you push them, they will open.
100%.
They will all open at the same time.
Like, listen, John, I keep forgetting to tell this story, right? And it's definitely not true crime, but you're going to love this, right? So my wonderful fiance, right? It's, I take great pleasure in, a little bit of harmless pranking on people, John, right? And those big boxes of when you're leaving the supermarket, those big, like, please leave an item here for the homeless, please, right? So we're walking out one day, and it was at Easter last year, so it's full of Easter eggs. And I'm like, "Oh, Dan, did you know that those boxes are for if you to take a free item from, right?" So she walks up, she picks it up, and honestly, she takes about 2 feet, and I'm like, "Dan, I'm only kidding. Those are gifts. Those are gifts for the needy people." And honestly, it was one of the funniest moments of my whole life, John, because she was so pleased with herself with her wee egg, and then absolutely mortified. I love to bring people up, and then
I did the same to a colleague. We went into Costa Coffee or one of them coffee shops.
Yeah.
And at the front of the till, there's like these little bars of chocolate. And I said to my friend, "They're for you. They're complimentary for you to eat for free while they're making your coffee." And he just started. He went, "Oh, really?" He just started eating them.
19 quid's worth of tiny bars of chocolate later.
Yeah. These little tiny. Because like a pound each or something crazy. But
so,
well, I would say it's a dangerous precedent to set when they take out, especially with policing, the physical element, the human element of it.
I agree.
And it, and you can. There's no crime of deceiving a machine, so you can deceive a person.
Yet, John,
but there's no crime of deceiving a machine.
Yeah, yet, John, right? Because, like, for example, I mean, if you were to go and kick a dog in the bum, right, probably aren't going to go to jail. You kick a police dog up the bum, right? Or you give a diabetic police horse a bunch of sugar cubes, you're going down. You're going down for, like, unaliving a police officer. Do you see what I mean? So there's going to be crazy RoboCop rules. 100%. You know what I'm saying?
What I'd say is good luck to anyone who wants to kick one of those police land sharks up the arse.
Don't kick any dogs up the arse. It was just a metaphor. Do you know what I'm saying? John learned the hard way.
Not a good choice. Yeah, especially a good choice.
Now, John, we're quite a big fan of true crime here on this channel, as you probably know. And last week we were talking about a series that came out on Disney called Fox Hollow Farm, about one of the most unknown or unheard of serial unalivers in America. And this week there's another series coming out, which is Candy, a death in Texas, right? So if you guys are watching, that's going to be the documentary series that we talk about one day this week. It's on Channel 4 in the UK. You'll be able to VPN it. Candy, a death in Texas, and it is all about this wild story of one friend taking an axe and turning her other friend into multiple pieces, and her avoiding jail time. And we're gonna talk about it. So, like I say, Channel 4 in the UK. Use a VPN if you have to. Love and Death in Texas. Check it out. So, that's one thing, John. I don't imagine you really listen to. I don't imagine you get much time. But do you ever watch any documentaries or docu-series? Or if you have, what anything?
Sometimes I don't tend to focus on the American stuff. I do like some of the British stuff that comes out. I think the British redo some of the best comedy, especially the BBC. I'm not a fan of the BBC, but they do brilliant comedy, and some of the documentaries are good as well. Some true crime, because every now and then there's an ex-colleague of mine. He hosts these things, and so I tend to watch his stuff. And there's some great independent things made online as well. People have put together,
of course,
their crime theories. So I mean, there was sad news. The statement analyst Peter Hyatt died earlier on today, and he's the one who put the information, the statement analysis together for the McCann family, and he was an incredible individual, and what an investigator. And the documentary that Richard D. Hall put together of Embedded Confessions, to this day, I'd say was probably the best crime investigation docu I've seen for,
Wow.
I think, ever.
Oh wow.
And and that was done by just an independent guy and his iPhone. But yeah, Peter Hyatt, the not the pioneer of this science, but definitely the one who really brought it into our front rooms and made a real name for himself through the McCann thing. He's unfortunately passed away, and a great shame because he, and I know he's done stuff with Sean and things like that, but yeah, what a mind, what an amazing mind.
And what was it you said that he specialised in, John?
Statement analysis. So it was finding guilt in the written word.
Okay, and how prevalent is that to cases? Like how often is that falling back on, or is it something that there's somebody going through it before each court case, or is it only in special cases?
Well, it's special because it costs money. We used a guy who was based, I'll keep him anonymous because that's what he wanted back in the day, but he was based in Southern Ireland. So if we had a serious abuse case, we would take it to him. But he worked on transcripts, so we had to interview the suspect, get a transcript, take it over to him. He would read through and he would tell us, right, you're dealing with a psychopath here, or you're dealing with a narcissist, or you're dealing with so-and-so, or you're dealing with a survivor themselves. And he would structure our interview. He was like what they call a tier 5 interview advisor. And he would tell us pointers. And he'd also give us pointers on how to make people kick off. So he would say, look, you're dealing with a very, very nasty individual. One guy in particular was a very, very violent man, but we're determined through this analysis that he was a repressed homosexual. And his violence was just a front to this other side of his life. But to the outside world, he was a womanizer, a player or whatever. But deep down, no, he wasn't. He liked men. And it was put to me, when you get him in the witness box, he will portray himself as a placid man, which is exactly what he did. He will portray himself as a professional, pseudo-intellectual, thinks he's very clever, but he's not. But you've got to try and get some line of questioning related to homosexuality in, and he won't be able to contain himself. So I relayed this information to my barrister, and she was like, that's brilliant. I'm going to run with that. I said, how? She said, I don't know, but we'll deal with it. By chance, this guy had moved from Brixton in South London to Hampstead, and she just used that as a lever because Hampstead is an epicenter of the gay community in London because of the Heath and things like that. And she managed to weave this in to her question, and exactly, to cue, this guy went from being the most placid individual to this animal. And then what he did was he picked up a Bible and he threw it at me in the middle of Crown Court and just totally lost it. And he lost the case in doing so because he proved he was a very manipulative and violent man.
Wow. Listen, just let me just sort of prod you a little bit more on this. So obviously you've done a lot of police interviews where you've got to kind of break the person or get evidence or get them to do that. Can you talk about some of the the most memorable or extreme moments? Names and things.
Without a doubt, the most notorious and memorable one was when I interviewed a lady called Tracy Connolly. Okay. Tracy Connolly had a young son called Peter. And Peter Connolly, aka Baby P. So it was quite an infamous case in UK history of a young boy that was tortured and abused to death by mum and by stepfather. Now, she was, and probably still is, quite a dangerous individual. She was, without a doubt, had terrible personality disorders. And was just a vicious, cruel woman. But she was a bully. Like most of these people, they're bullies. And a lot of police screw-ups are down to laziness and incompetence. They're in no way down to Freemasonic cover-ups, and that's right. You know, and that lad, I actually met him just before that photo was taken. He actually still has some injuries on him by his eye and things like that. So if you look carefully, he is actually supporting an injury by his left eye, that kid. Her and her boyfriend, I can't remember his name now, it's Jason something. No, anyway, they would just torture this kid. So they lived opposite Tottenham Hotspur football ground in an area called White Hart Lane, and they would take pleasure in torturing him. Now, her partner was into survivalists and martial arts and all this sort of stuff, and she would get her phone and time him and see how long her boyfriend could actually hold her son with his arms outstretched by his ears.
Oh, man.
Whilst their pet is no staff bull terrier would attack the kid. They would get the dog to attack the kid, and they would just take glee in watching the kid being attacked and scared. He would be beaten, battered. Oh, it was awful. We had broken back. He had a broken thigh. He was.
Oh, man.
But she was such a manipulator and such a strong character, and the social workers were so weak, as was the investigating officer, that she had them over, totally had them over. Now, the officer that was, this case kept getting passed from pillar to post, and when they did the Home Office review on it, they really criticised and sort of made sure that the social workers involved in it got dismissed. And to be honest, it wasn't wholly their fault. One of the social workers was a friend of mine, and she was an exceptional individual, but she got caught up in this and lost her job. But the police scraped by, right? And it was one of my major criticisms of these child protection investigative units. And what they did was they would just employ women on the whole. They'd employ women, and mainly women that were mums who just wanted to go home, and also they would take on women that were on coming back from maternity. So they're on sort of a staged return to work from maternity or long-term maternity, and these women just wanted, they were lactating, most of them, and they just wanted to go home and breastfeed their own kids and stuff like that. So they weren't interested in doing any actual proper work. Now, I'm probably going to upset many people in saying that, but I don't care. It really doesn't bother me because it causes failings to like these kids. And there was quite a few high-profile cases of children very similar to little Peter there that went through appalling injuries, absolutely appalling injuries. And that was because the police detective that was a lactating mum on both occasions didn't want to go into the home because it was smelly and dirty, and they thought they might catch scabies and bring it back to their little middle-class darlings at home. So it's base level as that. And many times I say, don't look at corruption, look at incompetence and laziness. So that the police's approach prior to my intervention, albeit very slight on this case, was absolutely appalling. So they took it off one woman who'd gone on maternity leave, who did nothing with it. They gave it to probably the most incompetent male officer going, who he actually was allowed to keep a fish tank on his desk, whereas my desk was just full of paperwork. He had hardly any cases going, and he had a fish tank on his desk. It was just absolutely useless individual. And he was given this case, and he did nothing with it. And he went sick, as he usually did, on the day that the mother was due to return on bail to be further interviewed. So she turns back. This case was already starting to get a lot of attention because it was well overdue for a review, and it just wasn't going away. As much as the police wanted it to go away, it wasn't going away. So I came into work. and I was given the briefing: go and interview this woman and see what you can do with this case, and
Right.
then bail her and hand it back. And then it was taken immediately off of me because my inspector knew that when I interviewed people, some of my interviews went on for 8 hours. So they gave it to my colleague, a nice, good guy. He's not a bad guy, but he would expedite things. So he got the job of being lead interviewer. This horror, she turns up. The boy is still at this time alive and in her care, but there is an 18-month investigation into her parenting, so he did nothing with it. And my colleague's briefing was interview her, get rid of her, rebail her, right? So he turns up uh, at this police station in Haringey. She's there with her solicitor, and true to the brief, my colleague turns around and he says, right, anything you've got to say about the allegations against you? She says no. He stops the interview. But the solicitor's happy, she's happy, but I'm not happy. So in this period, prep in the interview and also during the interview, I've read the paediatric report. And the paediatrician was an exceptional woman that worked in a central London hospital. And I'd had many cases under this woman. And she was South African, and she was probably one of the best paediatricians in the world. And she'd dealt with witchcraft cases, she'd dealt with Muti killings, all sorts. She'd heard and seen it all, this woman. She was very pro-police, very pro-child victims. So she was a dog. She really was, a yard dog, this woman. She was going to do a job, she did it properly.
Yeah, yeah.
And I liked her and I trusted her. And she'd written this phenomenal report based on her examination of the child injuries when he was presented before a short time before. And it was really stark, telling, and unambiguous. And this kid had many, many injuries under this one allegation. So, in protocol of interviewing, my colleague has to then, as me as the controller, ask me if I've got any questions. He wanted to get off early. I don't know for what reason. Anyway, that side. So he looks at me, sort of shakes his head and said, any questions, as to sort of just escalate John say no. I said, well, not really, but can I clarify a couple of things? Which seemed to go down well with all parties. Okay, but don't be too long. I said, no, I won't keep you. So I then said to her, Tracy, can we clarify some of these injuries and put them to bed? And my MO, my modus operandi of doing stuff was that I never wore a suit, never. I was always polite. I always offered everyone, including solicitors, defence solicitors, whom I had no respect for, I would always address them as sir, madam, or whatever, and I would always offer them tea, coffee, or whatever, always. And I do that to suspects, PDF files, everything. That was what I did. But I would come across as chaotic and thick, really thick. I would make out that I didn't really know what I was doing, that I couldn't read properly. And when you're dealing with people like her, you've got to put your pride to one side, and you've got to let them think that they're cleverer than you, because that's actually how they do think. They think that they're cleverer than you, and they're going to outwit you. So you give them a chance to do that. You don't stand there adversarially challenging them, because once you challenge someone like her, you break a relationship, and your goal is either to make her go no comment, which is brilliant. I love no comments because I could destroy someone in a court case with a no comment interview. And I would make it last all day at no comment interview. Or someone like her, a child abuser, would always, 9 times out of 10, they would talk. They would have to talk because they're arrogant and they're narcissistic. So they would always sound off, right? And think they're outwitting you. So I would give her the opportunity to do that. So I've got a chronology of offending and injuries, a list of injuries. So one of the things that she had was that this poor lad on his mouth at some point had bruising around the mouth. And I said, Tracy, there's bruising around the poor little lad's mouth. She went, well, he bruises, he's so easy, John, so easy. She called me sir. I said, no, officer or whatever, I don't know. I said, no, call me John, let's keep this. And she went, you know, I'm a really good mum. Now, when they say things like that to you, when a PDF file says, I never touched her, you know, they're telling you they touched her, right? This is what you've got to look at. This is how you've got to deal with this, right? And many interviews, people do that. I never touched, I never had an affair. It's like a guy who's caught out by his missus, you know, snogging someone. I never kissed her. He's telling you the opposite. You know, the opposite's the truth. You know what I mean? So she said, my son bruises really easy. I said, okay, well, how did he get that injury? So what we got to do, we've got to look at justice as a corridor with open doors. And each open door is an escape route for vile individuals like her. And we've got to shut them doors in that unique opportunity of the taped interview. We've got to shut them doors because otherwise we're going to leave them open. They're going to escape down there when it comes to court. Because bear in mind, Ron, that the caution says you do not have to say anything. They'll get cautioned 6 times during their detention. Yeah. So, and I'll say to Tracy, you don't have to say anything. But it may harm your defence. So your side of the thing is a defence. And your defence could be harmed if you do not mention one question. So if you don't mention something that I'm going to question you about, which you will later rely on in court, right? So if you then go down to the court, this ends up in court, and then you start telling the court about something, and I've asked you questions about it in this interview, your case is damaged. An inference is drawn, and an inference is a legal term for a common sense decision that you took the opportunity from bail to court to come up with a lie. So you reiterate this to them, right? So a bit like a credit card. Get a credit card, 0%, but then terms and conditions are read out. No one ever listens to it. Blah, 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 blah. Your house may be at risk. They tell you these things. So all of a sudden when you lose your house because you've racked up credit card bills and you start belly aching, well, good luck with that because contractually you were told. And it's the same as the police caution. You do not have to say anything, but it's a powerful statement that people go, oh, yeah. No, it's powerful. And it's legally binding. And of course, these fools just go, yeah, whatever. And officers don't even take the time to really go through it. But when you go through it, it's a weapon that's in your favour as an investigator. So I need to shut these doors down. Now, She then decides to tell me that her son bruises very, very easily. And that injury was caused by a child's toy. So we now need to know what child's toy is there? How many children's toys are there? There's millions of them. Millions of children's toys. Well, it turns out it was a teething ring. So it's a teething ring. So you get her to describe it, get her to draw it. She draws a body map for me of a little kid, and we put a mouth on it, and then we agree the injury is here. So she can't then claim ambiguity that what I said about mouth is different to what she says. It could be slang for something else. You know what I mean? So you're tying them down. But I'm doing it in such a thick manner. And she goes, I hear, yeah, that. And she then tells me that a teething ring with the consistency of a wet sponge was pushed into her baby's face. But who did that? She said his friend. Who's his friend? Mike Tyson? No, his friend was another 2-year-old child, right? So she's telling me that this injury, this bruising, we agree it's no other injury, this one here, was caused by a 2-year-old, and I've got to sort of mimic it, the speed of it. Put a 2-year-old pushed at slow speed, like that, in his mouth, something equivalent to a wet sponge.
Yeah.
And she tells me he bruises easily. No one believes me.
Wild.
So I say, well, Tracy, wow, he must bruise easily because that's really soft, them sponges, and a little kid hasn't got the strength. She said, yeah, this is what I'm telling you. So I'm on her side. I said, right, well, we've cleared that up then. And she's gleeful about that. So we move on to the next injury. The child had damage to his hip, bruising to the hip. So she says, I'm not going to go on too much longer than this. I need 2 to prove a point. She said he fell off the chair. Okay, we need to know, how high was the chair? What was it, an umpire's chair? What did he fall onto? No, it wasn't high at all. It was very low. It was a chair, sofa. She showed me the height, indicated it on her hip. So we sort of measure it. Well, that's about 2 foot something. But he didn't fall onto the floor. No, he fell onto a bean bag, which was halfway up the chair. So onto this, he fell off this low chair onto a soft bean bag and then rolled onto the floor. So I needed to know about the floor. What is on the floor? So carpeted, underlaid, wooden flooring is a lot softer than tiles on concrete. So we have to, and it's stuff as investigators, we can go and prove. We can go and get a warrant. We can remand her in custody, and we can go down there with building surveyors or whatever, and we can go down there and we can take photos, take samples, do diagrams, drawings, whatever, equations, and we can prove the value of that. Everything's got a value. Years ago in the 1970s, they had children's playgrounds with these big climbing frames that were made of metal and they were on concrete bases. And kids were getting terrible injuries. So they made the frames lower and the bases were this rubber matting, which was the same consistency as wet grass. So it wouldn't hurt them. So this is where I'm going with that. And these are all evidential doorways that vermin like her can go down. And with a clever defence team, they can convince a jury that this was an accident. But they can't with me, right? Because I'm tying her in knots now. She don't realise it. She thinks I'm thick and I'm going along with her deluded lies. So I said, wow, that goes to prove what you said, Tracy, doesn't it? And I'm talking like this as an imbecile, that your kid really does prove easy. She went, yeah, cool, I keep telling you. I said, they're not listening to you, are they? No, they ain't. You know, I said, well, hopefully when they read this transcript, they will listen, won't they? So we go through this plethora of injuries, right? So we do that. And then my friend's looking at me, pointing to his watch and all this stuff. Come on, John. But I've now accomplished what I needed to do. And now comes the vital part of the interview, and it's called the challenge. It's time to challenge. You must challenge your people you interview. You must challenge your suspects. But there's a way of doing it, right? Good interviewers, you challenge at the end, because the moment you challenge someone like her, this relationship is finished. This rapport that I've built up, this reciprocity that we've got going on is going to come to an end the moment I challenge her, because this woman is a narcissist. She is without a doubt a narcissist. So she is not going to take lightly to anyone criticizing her. And what she would do, she would try and bully to silence you and get you to acquiesce to her nonsense. Right. So I then pull up and I say, right, that's okay. Before we go, we've just got to offset that with the pediatric report. Right. Let's just go through what Dr. So-and-so from the hospital. I read then out the qualifications of this doctor. She even had an OBE. You know, she was that good at what she did. 25 years of brilliance helping children, this woman. Right. NHS angel, no two ways about it. And then a clever individual as well, right? So I'll read out the qualifications, when in itself is a case winner. And then we're going to go through what she said about the mouth injury. You said a soft toy by a 2-year-old, blah, 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 wet sponge thing. Yeah. This woman said, with no ambiguity, that is a high impact trauma injury with something solid, with the size and consistency of a fist. So she's basically saying that kid has been punched hard in the face. Bang. Job done. And her face, this troll's face, she's changed. Right, let's move on to the hip. Again, high impact trauma injury, like a drop from a height, blah, 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 onto concrete, onto whatever it was. You know, and then she gives her qualifications of being able to explain these injuries. right? And what would cause it, and what would cause a bruising. And there was nothing in this kid's physiology that said it bruised easily at all, you know, and that was backed up with other bits and pieces. Well, now it's game over for Fat Tracy. Game over for her. And that's it. She's lost it. She's lost it. Now, what happens then? I've outwitted her and her legal team, and they're not happy. Her solicitor then decides to pipe up. He decides to kick off. So I then position my chair so I am now facing her direct, and at no point is he in my view. So I rudely and arrogantly position my chair to totally cut the solicitor off. I lean across the table to almost obscure his view to her, and I tell him in no certain terms to shut his mouth. That he's not there for my benefit or the benefit of justice. He's there to protect this woman.
Yeah.
And I don't care what he says. I never invited him, and I don't want him now. Right? He kicks off, and I just said, I'm not interested, mate. And he can't contain it. His arrogance, his professionalism, his machoism has now been absolutely
Destroyed.
diminished. Oh, it's gone. It's gone. You know, I've decimated it. But I ignore him. I ignore him and his pompous pleas and everything else. He wants to stop the interview. I tell him it's got F all to do with him because it's gone mad. It's gone totally to rats now, right? So I keep firing at her. She's screaming abuse. She then stands up. She spits in my face and she screams at the top of her voice, "You see you next Tuesday," right? So then what have I done? I've unmasked this veneer of control, this veneer of the best mum, you know, this veneer that she presents to her neighbours, despite the screams and the pleas from that little kid that they would have heard. I get rid of the veneer that she gave to the incompetent officer that dealt with her before, and to her social workers and many before them. I've just peeled it back. And I turned around and I then said to her, that's the monster that your son sees. That's the monster that the court will see. And I've done my job. It was gone. It was finished. It was over. I didn't need to do anything else. Because when Sean, idiot, Puff Daddy, PDF file Coons dragged that woman across the corridor in the hotel, he did no different to her. He is no different to her. He let his mask slip. He could con the world that he's a good guy, that he was stressed, and he could do that. But the idiots will believe him. The uninitiated, the uneducated, the ignorant will believe him. The idolaters will believe him. But those that have suffered domestic violence and those that have come from his back, they ain't believing him. They know exactly what he is. And the victims and survivors know exactly what he is. And hopefully, after listening to stuff that we do, people outside will know what it is, because these interviews are an education for people, because you are being hoodwinked and lied to you. And these judges know it all the time. They know it. But the judges can only deal with provable facts and checkable lies. They have to deal with the proof laid before them. And it's not about the truth. It's the proof, not the truth. And if the police officers want to go home to their little kids because they're lactating, if the police officers are useless and have sick all the time and can't be bothered to investigate these crimes, if the social services likewise, right, then the proof is not there. But proof is like gold. If you want it, you have to dig for it. But it can be done. I did it. I'm not the only one. There's other superb officers that have done the same. But there's many F-ups of officers, pseudo officers that I'd call them, that haven't bothered to do it, and then they just blame it on the fact that the CPS's decision. No, it wasn't. The CPS weren't given the tools to prosecute because you never did the work. And this is what it comes down. This is a base level. It's not Freemasonry at work, although it might be at some level. You know, this isn't the Illuminati. This isn't this. This is laziness and incompetence. So back to your question of memorable interviews, that certainly, although it was a short one, was an absolutely phenomenal one. You know, and it was. But in other times, I would deal with serious and organised criminals who would go no comment, and they were seasoned at it. They were so seasoned at no comment, right? And you had a mutual respect for each other. And I would explain to them, look, I'm a bit of a dog. I'm going to have to cover every avenue, every legal avenue, right? Every legal point to prove, every excuse, every mitigation, every possibility. And it's going to be hard work for you, but this is what I'm going to do. So it's not personal, it's professional. And it will go on for hours and hours, and it'll be hard work for them because sometimes they just want to talk. But their solicitors will say no comment, and you'd explain to them, if you've done it, admit it. Because if you admit it, I guarantee you now, you will be charged and you will get a third off your sentence. So if that judge gives you 6 years, you're only going to get 4 and you'll be out in 2, right? But you don't, and you make that go all the way to trial. You make a victim, you ain't going to get any clemency. You ain't going to get any Home Office discount that you're entitled to, nothing. And the solicitors didn't like it, but some of them, they would turn around and go, do you know what? Of course I did it. We all know I did it, you know? Well, come on then. And you could get people that way. You know, is it dirty tricks? No, it's the game we play. And I was exceptionally good at it. And that's what it was. And you know, some of the top tier criminals that I dealt with, they had a respect for me. Because that's what I did. That is exactly how I played the game. And the judges liked me. And I ended up, as a result, getting a job as a specialist interviewer. And I went on to fine tune my skill and work with some of the best interviewers probably in the world. Some fantastic interviewers. And, you know, an interview is just a conversation with a purpose. And some of the fellows I worked with were brilliant, and they would go all around the world teaching this skill everywhere. And we were the envy of the you know, the justice system in other countries because we were so fine tuned at it. But you know, unfortunately, it's an opportunity that a lot of officers just don't bother with, and they don't see the merits in it. But I sort of did, and it paid dividends. It absolutely paid dividends without, you know, anyone being beaten up or anything. So it was a balancing game. But if they were good people, I had no reason to harm and hurt them at all. But if they were people like her, you would go over the top to make an effort, without a doubt.
Yeah,
You would
100%.
you would know what, you know. My job with her would be get her to kick off, and it was easy to do, to be honest. It was so easy to do, you know, especially if they're aggressive. Get them to kick off. You know, what better than a fight in an interview room? It's fantastic. It's, you know, and of course we've had many of them, and that is game over for them. Game over once that happens.
Yeah, that was a pretty immense breakdown of that story, John. I mean, you know, thank you for delving into that. And I just want to keep pressing you a little bit because this is a fascinating side to police work. I think that is, you know, often you don't really think about it too much. I mean, you see it in the movies, you know, the cop interrogating the guy and all this kind of stuff, but it's always the flamboyant side of it. You know what I'm saying? The good cop, bad cop routine, whatever. But to hear that kind of finer nuance of a man on a mission like yourself, where you were, you know, getting her to circle the mouth and draw it so there was no confusion about what a mouth was and all this kind of thing. It's incredible to hear. I imagine though, with the field that you worked in, John, I want to ask you something. Was there, and again, you don't have to name names or go into anything, but was there ever a nemesis who kept getting away from you, or who kept repeatedly escaping charges and just, you know, is the one?
There was one guy.
There's always
and,
one. Always one.
We called him Apo. I go as far as I won't say any more than that. And he was a serious and organised Turkish Kurdish gangster. Absolutely.
So already off to a great start, John. Already off to a great start. I imagine he's a lovely gentleman. Lovely gentleman.
Yeah, this was one deceptive, snaky individual, and he was snaky. And he was a casino cheat, but it was very much involved in heavy organised criminality involving you know, the Kurdish drug gangs and things like that.
A lot of H, John. It will be a lot of brown. A lot of brown.
A lot of brown. Well, he
I'm telling you.
he really was a snake. He tried to bribe me,
Oh,
everything, and we ended up with this sort of love-hate relationship. But I caused him a lot of damage. I really caused him a lot of damage. I did warrants on his house for non-payment of parking fines, and there was always a ways and a means of getting him. But this guy was making, on average, £80,000 a day. He was good. He really was good. He was what they call a card marker. He would mark cars in casinos, and he would go in as a wealthy Arab, and he would fleece casinos for millions, all told. But one day he decides to cheat a casino. He would go abroad. He would go all over the world, and the one reason that casino cheats come to notice is that the fact that they win. When anyone ever wins, security is called in a casino, and they check the footage. So you are instantly classed as a cheat to the security teams when you win. And this guy had your win rate, they allow 2%. Anything above that, you're a cheat. Of course, this guy, he was just winning constantly. And they tried to nick him. The teams before I was on that post, and they could never get. He was just classed as a snake. This guy, they couldn't get anyway. So they never even knew who he was until I turned up. He had so many different aliases. Anyway, I identified him. I found out who he was, and I made his life a real misery. So he was connected to the assassination attempt on me and all sorts of things. However, he decides to chance his arm at cheating the most opulent casino in Moscow. So
I'm not being funny. You started this off awfully nonchalant. Oh, he's a bit of a casino, but then you're like, oh, he also contributed to my potential assassination.
Yeah. He wanted me dead. So it'll all be in the book what went on with it. It's quite a story anyway. So there was a contract for £40,000 per hour to shoot me, and it was all connected to the same gang.
This was the 90s, right? This was in the 90s,
early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, that's 40 grand's a wedge of cash back. You know what I'm saying?
Well, he offered me 80,000 cash, and I wouldn't take it, and he just said, "Big problem." Did that? Big problem, John. Big problem. Anyway, so I'm at work one day, and the phone goes, and it's the security team at this Moscow casino, and they went, because I got sort of known all around the world for supplying information of known cheats and identifying them, because they just have millions of aliases and different passports and in different nationalities and everything. So you could get a Turkish criminal would have a Portuguese driving license, a Brazilian passport, a Latvian health card, and crazy boys. So he said, "Look, there's this guy here on the poker table, and he's taken us for something like 200,000. We don't know what he's doing. Can we send you a picture of him?"
Can we send you? Oh, yeah.
I said, yeah. I said, send it through. I'm at work now. I send it through to my email. Anyway, they take a picture of him, and of course he had this unique hairline, and it sort of went back, and he had this. I just knew him by his hairline.
Yeah.
And I went, I know who that is. I said, that's Apo. And he went, oh, right. And I went, is he still there? They went, yeah. And he got a walkabout phone. I said, put him on the phone. So they go up to him at the table, tap him on the shoulder, and they said, Mr. some false name. He's like, yes, telephone. And he answers it. And all they heard him say was, you bastard, John. Right? And that was it, game over. And so they said, right, we'll deal with it from here. They took him into a room, battered him, and then they locked him under a staircase for 2 days.
I bet he was well pleased with you when he got out of there. I bet he was well pleased with you, John. Okay.
Yeah. It was rubbing salt in the wounds, but so they just give him a massive kicking. And then they locked him in a broom cupboard under a stairs for 2 days, in total darkness. And that was their way of dealing with him. But but he was the one. He was always slipping through. But when it come to the PDF files, there was one particular case, and a lady goes into a northwest London police station, and she's a mess, right? She cut all her own hair off. She had 2 children with her, and she was bruised in her face. And it's late at night, and she burst into tears, and she said, "Look, I need help. My husband's going to kill me." And they then speak to her, and of course, she's a victim and a survivor of terrible domestic violence. But she makes disclosure that her husband had been doing things to their 2 daughters, and she caught him doing it. And she just had enough. And it'd been going on for years. So they call up the child protection, and I'm the on-duty detective for that part of London. And they go down there. So I zoom down to this place, and this woman's there, and I listen to her, and it's awful. This man, it's difficult to say really on here, but she caught him. He was also a preacher, so he would set up churches all around the country and abroad, and proclaim that he was a pastor, a preacher, a Christian. And of course, he wasn't. He was the opposite. He was a pervert and a serious danger to children, and just a manipulator and a liar. He would even get the church, various denominations of the church, he'd get them to fund his trips and his holidays, and they'd give him thousands, believing his rubbish. But again, if you went against him, he was a bully, and he would complain. He'd take things to Parliament. Anyone who dared question him, if it was a social worker, he'd go to the head of social services for the country, and he could get people sacked and everything. He was a very vexatious, litigious, horrible man. And this woman, she was an immigrant. She was from Eastern Europe, and one morning he just was constantly beating her up, battering her. And one day she woke up in bed, heard this noise, and he was R-ing their little 7-year-old daughter. So she has had enough, and she confronts him, and what he does is subhuman. He beats her senseless, and then he jumps on her back and he breaks her back. He then well, this is what we're dealing with. So what he did then, every night he would get the Bible and he would read, I think, the book of Peter, where it says, "Women submit to your husbands as you do to I," meaning God, right? So he would read this scripture out of the Bible with the children there, and he would sodomize his wife in front of them all. And that went on for 7 nights. That was her punishment. And he would make her still cook while she had a broken back. She had to crawl on her hands and knees. This is what this poor woman went through. And that was it. I was going for him. And I was really going for this guy. And I did. I managed to get him a substantial prison sentence. But it was one of the most difficult things, because he was such a snake. He was such a horrible, slippery individual. He would choose any little loophole or breach in the law. He would exploit it to his benefit. Now, he would even do it to his solicitors. And in the end, whilst he was on trial, his barrister walked past me and whispered, "Get that CUNT double figures. I hate him." His own barrister said that. And I don't know how it happened, but for some reason, what he'd done got leaked into the prison populace. I have no idea how that come about.
Yeah, exactly.
And whilst he was on remand, a prisoner went up and stuck a pen straight in his eye. Bang! Stuck a ballpoint pen in his eye. And he tried to worm out of the court case with one eye, but the judge hated him as well. But everyone hated him. He's horrible, but he was one of the people you had to do everything by the book and as professionally as you could, because any breach of regulation, of protocol, operating practices, this man would take it. But, you know, at the end of it, when you watch them get sent down, it's brilliant and it's empowering for the victim. And his wife went on to live a great life after that. She blossomed after that. I'm still in touch with her now. She's a committed Christian now. She's a kids have gone to university. They're doing incredibly well. They suffered terribly, as did she, but she was strong, decent woman despite the most abhorrent abuse she went through. And she gave a testimony, I think, in Trafalgar Square for women who had been abused, and she said, "Look, this detective really went out of his way for me. You know, she stood up for the police because they were criticising the police's apathy and lack of resolve when it comes to these sort of cases. And she said, no, I've got to stand up for them because this guy really did a good job." And the organizer said, well, would you want to name him? She said, well, we can't. I won't name him. It's not fair. And he apparently the organizer said, by a long shot, it wasn't a guy called John Wedger, was he? And she said, well, actually, yeah, he was. And we went, yeah, well, you know, we follow him. We, you know, so it was just a long shot. But yeah, he was really, and that's where professionalism really comes into it. But also the drive that hatred gives you. It sounds horrible, and as a Christian, I sort of conflict myself with that. But
John, it's a hell of a motivator. It's a hell of a motivator.
Unbelievable. Of course, it's incredible. It's incredible. Yeah, and it definitely motivated me for that, and a major highlight in my career.
As a Christian, are you not allowed to hate the act and not the person?
Yeah. What do they say? Hate the sin, love the sinner.
That's it. No, listen.
This guy was evil. He was just evil, and anywhere he went, he just caused. He set up a hate campaign against me on release from prison. You know,
obviously, John.
But
obviously,
and then I got a special unit from the police. Said, look, he's put online that he knows where you live, and you know we need to warn you that this guy could be a threat. And I went, he's no threat to me. I said, good, let him have my address. Good, he can come round any time he wants. Good.
He's under the mat.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah. Well,
I'll quite happily deal with that.
Right,
there's a guy called John Ramirez.
Yeah.
And he's an exceptional speaker. He's a pastor. He's a preacher. He's a minister in America. He's a former gang boss. He's South American guy from the Bronx. He's close friends with Jennifer Lopez, and he was heavily involved in witchcraft in the form of voodoo called Santeria. He was a high priest in Santeria and in organized criminality. And he's like an Italian wise guy, you know. He's quite a good-looking fella, very charismatic, got that Bronx accent, but he's now a born-again Christian and he does some incredible work. John Ramirez is well worth checking out. But he calls out Marilyn Manson for child cases, you know, and he does it publicly. And he said, you know, although my Christian values, I ever come across you, he said, I'm just going to beat you. And he says it openly. He says it openly in front of millions of viewers. You better run when you see me. Run when you see me. He said, because you will not like the vengeance I've got for you.
Yeah.
So, even Jesus beat up the bankers and the money lenders. So righteous indignation. Let's call it that. Righteous indignation.
Well, listen, we've all been waiting patiently for the bloody John Wedger stories of John Wedger book. Like, when we get in the Wedger book?
Yeah, it's I'm on the very final part of it now. I was stuck with my formative years because I didn't think that they were newsworthy, but they without them there's a break in the whole narrative. So
hell yeah, get it packed in there, John. Get it packed in.
So I've done it, and I've actually found it quite entertaining talking about my childhood. It sort of made me laugh. So that has been the,
Well,
the stopping point. The rest of it's 2/3 of it's done.
John, listen, right? So obviously it's been quite a heavy chat this evening, some amazing stories. For the last 5 minutes, we're gonna have a little bit of fun. All right. So I want you to imagine the book's come out, it's gone crazy around the world. The world's calling out for the John Wedger Netflix series. Okay. So who's going to play John Wedger in the Netflix series, right? So I want to put forward my suggestion, right? And you'd have to get the accent right? But how good would Mads be as John Wedger in the Netflix series about John Wedger, right? Now, I don't know if you've ever seen this guy acting, John, but he's a full-on method actor. And he was the guy that played Hannibal in the Hannibal TV series, right?
Oh, okay, right.
And he's a badass, right? He's a badass. He usually plays pretty badass people, but man, I'm telling you, as like he could nail your inner monologue.
Well, funny enough, I had an interview with Radio 4. I did a little bit, a few things with the BBC, and one of the producers for Radio 4 also writes does screenplays, documentaries, and she's
sweet.
And so this was a few years ago, and she turned around and she said, "Look, we'd like to dramatise your work with the casino crime."
Oh,
and she said, I've sourced an actor for you, right, to play you, and I've already spoken to him, and he's willing to do it. And I went, "Go on then, who is it?" And of course, I'll be happy for this good-looking dude to do it. She said, "It's Toby Jones." Just Google Toby Jones. And I said, "Oh, you can't be serious." I'm not saying that, I'm any sort of...
Oh, yeah, but what time period is this? How old are you? Wait.
This was about 10 years ago.
Wait. No.
Yeah.
Not
Toby Jones. I told my sister, she went, "John, you better look who that bloke is." And I went, "Oh, yeah, I thought it was an insult." But,
I'm going to be honest with you. He's an incredible actor, right?
Yeah.
Incredible actor, but Toby Jones ain't the one.
No.
Okay, he ain't the one. Okay. And do you know what? I almost went with Liam Neeson, right, for John, right? But it was too obvious, right? Liam Neeson, you'd turn up expecting the English version of "I have a particular skill set," take it, right? Whereas with Mads, no one's seeing that coming.
Well, funny enough, my old detective inspector, a guy called Paulie, he's the best guy I've ever worked for. Exceptional boss that you would follow to the end, and he was definitely one of them. He's made me take a place that I fully name him. He's an ex boxer, a Belfast Catholic. He's a singer. He's a good guitarist. He's just an all-round cool dude. And Paul, if you're listening, I love you a bit, man. But his cousin is Liam Neeson. That's his cousin.
Nice.
Yeah, and he's got that sort of vibe to him. So
So we've got our foot in the door with Neeson. Neeson's the most likely. I just want to say, I looked up Tom Hardy, right? See if we were going to do John Wedger, the early years, right, where we just the first series already gone crazy. John's got tens of millions, and he no longer gives a rat's ass. So we can we can fabricate the early years. We definitely get Tom Hardy for young Wedger.
One of my best supporters when I first started this, when I teamed up with Chris Lambriano, was Tom Hardy. And he sent me a message. And he just said, "I back you. I fully support you. Keep going." And he encouraged me to the hilt, Tom Hardy. So,
listen,
so
we're getting Tom Hardy now. Sorry, Mads. Mads, unless you're watching, you better DM John pretty rapid, because it was Liam Neeson. Now we've got Tom Hardy on the block. Okay. I'm telling you now, 100%.
The thing is, they've got to be scruffy. I can't have anyone wearing a suit. There's no suit.
See, well, this is where Mads comes in, man. Like, don't get me wrong. Tom Hardy would, every single woman over the age of 40 or single mum in the entire country would be tuning in religiously, John, just for the Tom Hardy factor. But man, what a
I can remember taking a prisoner into one of the police stations in the West End, and it was a guy. He was quite a well-known criminal, and me and him had a bit of history. And as we walk in, he's complaining that I've taken too many cigarettes off of him in the past. So you walk through the custody door, he's saying, next time, Wedger, he said, you're getting a cigarette, you understand me? And it clips me around the head. And bear in mind, he's my prisoner. As he does that, the sergeant orders the 2 jailers, take that man straight to the cell. They take me to the cell. They drag me straight to the cell. And this guy says, no, Sarge, I'm his prisoner. He's the officer. He was like, you're joking. And he went, no, he's... And they brought me back. He went, no.
Well, listen, there's nothing wrong with that, mate. That's the thing. You got to blend. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can't be so clean cut. That's the one. So listen, get your suggestions in. I'm telling you, Mads is the one though for the John Wedger series. And Netflix, if you're watching, okay, all I want is a background extra role in every episode. Okay, I want it, and then everyone can try and find me walking through a street behind John or delivering a letter in the background. It'll be brilliant. But listen, John, it's been another fantastic week. Your stories are do you know, I forget about your stories, right? I'll be honest with you. We talk about true crime. You are the true crime, John. And it's fascinating and it's amazing when you share these stories. So thanks so much for throwing all that out there.
And you know, it's a shame that era and that sort of method of policing is gone. And if only, you know, it would be on these 24 hours in police custody, you could see a little bit of realism like that. It would be so refreshing.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, I'll be honest. I don't think it will be. I think things are going to change for you once that book comes out. Whether it's, you know, there's jobs where you work for places like Netflix, and when they're making true crime, you're the guy that helps them piece it together so it's realistic and all that kind of stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? Just make sure you bill them. Make sure you bill them real hard, John.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've yet to earn a penny out of anything, but it's never been about that. So it's never been about that. But if it comes, it comes. If it don't, it don't. But the journey has been unforgettable, and it has, without a doubt, the journey's been unforgettable.
Well, it's coming now, mate. It's coming. I'm telling you, this year, right? There's weird things in the horizon, and I honestly think that your big, massive dose of luck, right, is just dangling on a string over this book right now. And as soon as you're ready to put it out, that big thing is going to fall.
Well, my best accolade was when the Minister for Policing stood in front of the Home Secretary and the government and said, you know, John Wedger, this is this guy who's done this, done that, and we need to get behind him and support him. And then Theresa May stands up in the House and says, stay away from John Wedger. He's a conspiracy theorist and he's trouble.
Yeah,
you know, so that was one of the highlights.
Never a truer word. Never a truer word being said, John. Nothing but a conspiracy theorist and a crazy man. I don't think
trouble. Stay away from him if you know what's good.
Oh, you're definitely trouble. That's the only part there that
all I've got to do is upset the Pope now, and we're laughing, aren't we?
No, he's too close.
I've upset the mafia. Upset the Pope, and I would have done what John F. Kennedy did. Upset a lot of them.
Listen, just wait until we've got a new Pope, because they'll pin his demise on you. Do you know what I'm saying? Was that John Wedger stressing him out too much?
Well, if we look at the Patrus Romanus, this is the last Pope apparently. So,
great!
The last Pope.
Nothing like a holy freaking testament to put fear in the world. You gotta love it.
Yeah. So
well, listen,
maybe
John, thank you very much, everyone. Get spamming Mads, get spamming Netflix. We want the John Wedger life story televised. None of this 15+ crap. We want an 18+. Like, oh, John. Last 2 minutes. On Netflix, there is a series called Gangs of London, right? Please watch this, right?
Okay.
And come back and tell me how accurate this is for the ruthlessness of gangs in London. I have never seen a TV show like this. The opening 5 minutes of episode 1 sets the tone, okay? And it's all about the big gangster of the whole of London being assassinated by 2 little kids, not kids, but youngsters trying to make a few bucks, and the whole snowball effect of it all. You need to watch Gangs of London. It's brutality. It's brutality with the just incredible writing thrown in and great actors, and it's just amazing. So yeah, go and watch that. All right, everyone, thank you for being here. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share. Big up for John Wedger, and we're almost in underpants season, right?
Nearly there. I've let the side down with the pants swimming, but this year.
Ah,
But,
man.
yeah.
Ah, mate,
But I've
it's
been
coming
bitten
back.
by a dog, so that sort of makes up for a bit of it, doesn't it? So
Bitten by Lassie, mate. Bitten by Lassie.
bitten by, yeah.
You know, right? Listen, this is the thing, though, man. Like, if you know all these badasses that you take down, all these threats, all these things, and freaking Lassie almost turns you into a cyclops.
Yeah, it nearly takes me out the equation. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Love you guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks, John. Take it easy. See you next week. And